Evelyn sat in her cozy living room, a soft blanket draped over her knees as she leisurely knitted by the window. The golden afternoon light filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the wooden floor. The rhythmic click of knitting needles provided a soothing background to the tranquility of the moment. It was a scene of serene domesticity, a perfect encapsulation of Evelyn's quiet life. Suddenly, the phone rang, shattering the peaceful silence. Evelyn's heart gave a small jump at the unexpected sound, but she quickly set her knitting aside and reached for the phone on the side table. She had always been cautious, yet there was something about the unexpected that always piqued her curiosity. As she answered, a kind-sounding man's voice filled the line, introducing himself as a representative from her bank. His tone was reassuring and professional, instantly putting her at ease. He explained that there had been some suspicious activity on her account and that he needed to verify some details to secure it. Evelyn, trusting the familiar name of her bank and the authoritative tone of the man, felt a wave of concern wash over her. She couldn't ignore the possibility of her hard-earned savings being at risk. With a sense of urgency, Evelyn provided the requested information, her mind racing with thoughts of what could have gone wrong. She imagined faceless criminals accessing her account, siphoning off her money bit by bit. The man's voice continued in a calm, methodical manner, asking for more details to ensure her account's security. Evelyn's trust in the man grew with each word, his demeanor exuding confidence and control. As the conversation progressed, a nagging feeling tugged at the back of her mind. Something about the situation felt off, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The man on the other end seemed too perfect, too reassuring. Yet, she brushed aside her doubts, attributing them to her own overactive imagination. She reminded herself that banks were always vigilant about security and that this was just a routine procedure. After providing all the necessary information, Evelyn thanked the man and hung up the phone. She sat back in her chair, a sense of relief washing over her. She had done the right thing, she told herself. Her account was now secure, and she could return to her peaceful afternoon. But as the minutes ticked by, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her chest. She picked up her knitting again, but her hands moved mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She decided to call the bank directly, just to confirm that everything was indeed in order. The thought of being scammed gnawed at her, and she needed reassurance. Dialing the bank's number, she waited impatiently for a representative to answer. When she finally got through, she explained the situation, her voice tinged with anxiety. The bank representative's response was not what she expected. They had no record of any suspicious activity on her account, nor had they made any calls to her that day. Evelyn's heart sank as the realization hit her. She had been duped. The kind-sounding man who had seemed so professional and trustworthy was a fraud. She felt a wave of anger and embarrassment wash over her. How could she have been so gullible? She prided herself on being cautious, yet she had fallen for the oldest trick in the book. The bank representative assured her that they would take immediate action to secure her account and investigate the fraudulent call. Evelyn felt a mix of relief and frustration. While her account would be protected, the fact that she had been deceived left a bitter taste in her mouth. As she hung up the phone, Evelyn sat back in her chair, her knitting forgotten. The cozy warmth of her living room now felt suffocating, the golden afternoon light mocking her naivety. She vowed to herself that she would never be so trusting again. The world was full of people who preyed on the unsuspecting, and she would not be caught off guard a second time. Evelyn's peaceful afternoon had been irrevocably altered by the phone call. It was a harsh reminder that even in the safety of her own home, she was not immune to the dangers of the outside world. She would carry this lesson with her, a shield against future deception. And as she picked up her knitting once more, the rhythmic click of the needles provided a small measure of comfort, a reminder that life, despite its challenges, continued on. The sun had just started to dip below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow through the lace curtains of Evelyn's cozy living room. Nestled in her favorite armchair, she was surrounded by the soft hum of domesticity. The gentle click of her knitting needles provided a rhythmic counterpoint to the reassuring murmur of her favorite radio show. This was her sanctuary, a haven of routine and comfort that she treasured deeply. Evelyn's life had always been a tapestry of simple pleasures. Each morning began with a steaming cup of tea, the same blend her mother had introduced her to decades ago. Her days were filled with the familiar rituals of tending to her garden, chatting with neighbors, and indulging in her passion for knitting. It was a quiet life, but one that brought her immense satisfaction. As the radio host's familiar voice filled the room with stories of far-off places and intriguing events, Evelyn felt a sense of connection to the wider world. She often imagined the lives of the people mentioned in the broadcasts, weaving their tales into the fabric of her own daydreams. Was a small escape, a way to journey beyond the confines of her small town without ever leaving her armchair. Just as she was finishing a particularly intricate stitch, the shrill ring of her phone cut through the tranquility. Startled, Evelyn set her knitting aside and reached for the receiver. It was rare for her phone to ring at this hour, and she couldn't help but feel a flicker of curiosity as she answered. On the other end of the line was a voice that immediately put her at ease. The man introduced himself as a representative from her bank, his tone warm and reassuring. He explained that there had been some suspicious activity on her account and that he needed to verify a few details to ensure her security. Evelyn, ever trusting and familiar with the bank's name, felt no reason to doubt him. As she provided the requested information, a sense of unease began to creep in. It was subtle at first, a nagging feeling at the back of her mind. But the man's tone remained calm and professional, and Evelyn pushed her doubts aside. After all, she had always prided herself on being vigilant and responsible with her finances. The conversation ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Evelyn alone once more in the quiet of her living room. She tried to return to her knitting, but the rhythm was broken, her mind unable to shake the lingering sense of discomfort. The radio show continued to play, but its stories no longer held the same allure. Instead, Evelyn found herself replaying the phone call in her mind, searching for any signs that something was amiss. As the evening wore on, Evelyn's disquiet grew. She decided to call her bank directly, seeking reassurance that everything was indeed secure. The voice on the other end this time was different, less warm, more businesslike. The representative confirmed her worst fears. There had been no suspicious activity on her account, and no one from the bank had called her that evening. Panic surged through Evelyn as the realization sank in. She had been deceived, her trust exploited by a faceless stranger. Her mind raced with the implications of what she had unwittingly revealed. The cocoon of safety she had woven around herself now felt fragile, the threads unraveling with each passing moment. Determined to take action, Evelyn spent the following hours contacting her bank, freezing her accounts, and reporting the fraud. The process was exhausting, each step a painful reminder of her vulnerability. But amidst the turmoil, a steely resolve began to form. She would not allow this violation to define her. Evelyn had always been resourceful and resilient, and she would navigate this crisis with the same strength that had carried her through life's challenges. By the time she finally returned to her armchair, the room was bathed in the soft light of dawn. The radio had long since fallen silent, and her knitting lay untouched. Evelyn gazed out the window, watching as the first rays of sunlight chased away the shadows. In the midst of uncertainty, she felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was determined to reclaim her peace of mind and restore the sense of security that had been so abruptly shattered. Evelyn sat hunched over her kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the silence. The cold glow of the overhead light cast long shadows across the room, illuminating the stark reality of her situation. Her fingers trembled as she leafed through the bank statements, each line of text blurring into the next. The numbers, once a source of comfort and security, now seemed like a cruel joke. She had always been meticulous with her finances, a habit ingrained in her from years of careful planning and frugality. But as she scanned the latest statement, her heart sank. Every cent of her savings had vanished, leaving her account balance alarmingly close to zero. The realization hit her like a physical blow, a wave of panic rising in her chest as she struggled to comprehend the enormity of the loss. Desperation clawed at her as she reached for the phone, dialing the bank's number with shaking hands. Her mind raced, replaying the conversation she'd had just a week earlier. She had been assured that everything was in order, that her funds were safe. But now, as she listened to the impersonal voice on the other end of the line, her hopes were dashed. The representative had no record of the previous interaction, no explanation for the missing money. Evelyn felt a deep sense of shame and vulnerability. She had always prided herself on her independence, her ability to manage her own affairs. But now, in the face of this bewildering crisis, she felt utterly lost. The thought of asking for help was almost unbearable, but she knew she had no other choice. With a heavy heart, she dialed her grandson Jake's number. As the phone rang, she could only hope that he would understand, that he would know what to do. Evelyn's pride was a small price to pay for the chance to reclaim her stolen security. In the moments that followed, Evelyn felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching her own life unfold from a distance. The kitchen, once a place of warmth and comfort, now felt like a foreign land. She could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, each second stretching into an eternity. Her thoughts drifted to the past, to the countless hours she had spent in this very room, preparing meals for her family, sharing laughter and love. Those memories seemed almost unreal now, overshadowed by the grim reality of her present predicament. Evelyn's mind raced with questions. Who could have done this? How had they gained access to her account? She had always been so careful, so vigilant. The uncertainty gnawed at her, a constant reminder of her vulnerability. As she waited for Jake to answer, she tried to steady her breathing, to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She needed to stay focused, to think clearly. There had to be a way to fix this, to unravel the mystery and reclaim what was rightfully hers. When Jake finally answered, Evelyn felt a surge of relief. His voice, though tinged with concern, was a lifeline in the darkness. She explained the situation as best she could, her words tumbling out in a rush. Jake listened patiently, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to her own turmoil. Evelyn could hear the faint sounds of Jake's computer keyboard clicking in the background as he began to investigate. He assured her that he would do everything in his power to help, that he would leave no stone unturned. His confidence was reassuring, a beacon of hope in an otherwise bleak landscape. Hours seemed to pass in a blur as they worked together, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. Jake's technical expertise was invaluable, his knowledge of the digital world far surpassing her own. With each new discovery, they inched closer to the truth, the tangled web of deception slowly unraveling before their eyes. Evelyn marveled at Jake's determination, his unwavering commitment to helping her. It was a testament to the bond they shared, a reminder that she was not alone in this fight. Despite the fear and uncertainty, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to see this through to the end. As the hours wore on, Evelyn found herself growing more and more exhausted. The emotional toll of the day's events weighed heavily on her, her mind and body yearning for rest. But she knew that sleep would not come easily, not with so many unanswered questions lingering in her mind. She glanced at the clock, noting the late hour. It had been a long and arduous day, but they had made significant progress. Jake had identified several suspicious transactions, each one pointing to a potential lead. It was a glimmer of hope, a sign that they were on the right track. Jake arrived at Evelyn's house with an air of purpose. The evening sky had begun to darken, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban street. Evelyn's house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, a small, modest home with a well-kept garden that now seemed eerie under the fading light. He walked up the path, feeling the crunch of gravel under his feet, and knocked on the door, which opened almost immediately. Evelyn's eyes were red and swollen from crying, her face a mask of despair. She led him inside, her steps hesitant, as if she was unsure whether to trust him with the burden that weighed so heavily on her heart. Jake's mind was already racing, analyzing the situation and preparing to find the gaps where the scammer had slipped through. They settled in the living room, a cozy space filled with warm colors and family photographs. Evelyn began to recount her ordeal, her voice trembling as she described the deception. Jake listened intently, his eyes narrowing as he pieced together the fragmented clues. The scammer was clever, no doubt, but Jake had a sharp mind honed by years of studying cybersecurity. He could sense a pattern emerging, a trail of digital breadcrumbs that the scammer had left behind, perhaps unknowingly. Evelyn's voice broke as she explained the financial loss, the betrayal that cut deeper than any monetary sum. She had trusted the wrong person, and the realization left her feeling vulnerable and exposed. Jake reassured her, his calm demeanor masking the storm of thoughts whirling in his mind. He promised that they would catch the scammer, and that promise was not made lightly. As Evelyn continued to speak, Jake's mind was already formulating a plan. He knew he would need access to her computer, her emails, and any other digital footprints that might lead them to the culprit. He asked Evelyn for permission, and she nodded, leading him to her small home office. The room was cluttered with papers and books, a testament to her busy life. Jake sat down at her desk, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he navigated through her digital world. He traced the emails back to their source, noting the subtle manipulations that had ensnared Evelyn. Each click, each line of code brought him closer to understanding the scammer's methods. He could almost see the shadowy figure on the other side of the screen, a faceless entity weaving a web of deceit. Hours passed as Jake delved deeper into the digital labyrinth. Evelyn watched him, a mixture of hope and anxiety in her eyes. She had placed her trust in him, and he was determined not to let her down. Finally, he leaned back in the chair, a glimmer of triumph in his eyes. He had found a lead, a small but significant clue that could unravel the scammer's identity. Jake explained his findings to Evelyn, his voice steady and confident. They would need to act quickly, but he was optimistic. The scammer had made a mistake, and Jake was ready to exploit it. He reassured Evelyn once more, his promise echoing in the quiet room. Together, they would see this through. Evelyn felt a surge of hope, a spark of determination igniting within her. She was not alone in this fight. With Jake's expertise and her own resilience, they had a chance to turn the tables on the scammer. She nodded, her resolve strengthening. They would catch the person who had wronged her, and justice would be served. As Jake prepared to leave, he gave Evelyn a list of steps to secure her accounts and protect her information. She thanked him, her gratitude evident in her eyes. He promised to keep her updated and assured her that they would get to the bottom of this. With a final nod, he stepped out into the night, his mind already planning the next move. Evelyn watched him go, a sense of calm settling over her. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but with Jake's help, she felt ready to face it. She closed the door, a newfound determination burning within her. This was just the beginning of their journey, and she was prepared to see it through to the end. The night wore on, but Evelyn found herself unable to sleep. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, plans, and hopes. She replayed the events of the day, each detail etched into her memory. The fear and despair were still there, but they were now tempered by a growing sense of empowerment. She was not a victim. She was a fighter, and she was ready to take back control. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, Evelyn rose from her chair, a sense of clarity washing over her. This was her life, her story, and she would not let a scammer dictate its course. With Jake's help, she would uncover the truth and bring the perpetrator to justice. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that she had the courage and determination to see it through. Jake was setting up his laptop at Evelyn's dining table, the dim morning light filtering through the curtains. The events of the previous day still lingered in his mind, but his focus was now solely on the task at hand. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he began tracing the phone number that had caused Evelyn so much distress. The number led to a disposable burner phone, a common tool for those wanting to stay anonymous, but Jake knew this was only the beginning. With each keystroke, he delved deeper into the digital trail left by the scammer. He meticulously analyzed the call records, noting patterns and times, piecing together a puzzle that was slowly starting to take shape. His years of experience in the tech community had equipped him with a network of connections, and he was ready to leverage them to uncover the truth. The dining table was strewn with papers, notes, and printouts of call logs. Jake's eyes scanned each document, cross-referencing details and making notes in the margins. He knew that every piece of information, no matter how small, could be crucial in tracing the perpetrator. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and strategies, each one leading him closer to the source of the calls. As he worked, he could feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. Evelyn was counting on him to find answers, and he was determined not to let her down. The sense of urgency was palpable, but it only served to fuel his determination. The scammer had made a mistake by targeting Evelyn, and Jake was going to make sure they paid for it. Hours passed, and the sun rose higher in the sky, casting a warm glow over the dining table. Jake's eyes were tired, but his resolve was unwavering. He was making progress, slowly but surely. The digital trail was leading him to a series of online transactions, each one a step closer to identifying the scammer. He knew that this was a game of cat and mouse, but he was confident that he was closing in on his target. He paused for a moment, taking a sip of the now-cold coffee that sat beside his laptop. His mind was racing, but he knew that he needed to stay focused. The scammer was clever, but Jake was determined to be one step ahead. He continued to dig deeper, following the trail of breadcrumbs that would eventually lead him to the person responsible. As the day wore on, Jake's hard work began to pay off. He had traced the online transactions to a series of fake accounts, each one linked to a different name and address. It was clear that the scammer was trying to cover their tracks, but Jake was relentless. He knew that he was getting closer, and the thought of bringing the perpetrator to justice kept him going. He reached out to his contacts in the tech community, enlisting their help in tracking down the IP addresses associated with the fake accounts. It was a painstaking process, but Jake knew that it was necessary. Every detail, every piece of information brought him one step closer to uncovering the truth. As the sun began to set, Jake felt a sense of accomplishment. He had made significant progress, but he knew that there was still work to be done. The scammer was clever, but Jake was determined to outsmart them. He would not rest until he had uncovered the truth and brought the perpetrator to justice. Evelyn watched from the doorway, a mixture of hope and anxiety etched on her face. She could see the determination in Jake's eyes, and it gave her a renewed sense of strength. She knew that they were in this together, and that they would not stop until they had found the answers they were looking for. The room was filled with the sound of keystrokes and the rustle of papers as Jake continued his investigation. He was getting closer, and he could feel it. The scammer's web of deceit was starting to unravel, and it was only a matter of time before Jake had enough evidence to take action. As the night wore on, Jake's determination only grew stronger. He was driven by a sense of justice, a desire to right the wrongs that had been done to Evelyn. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face whatever obstacles lay in his path. With each passing hour, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Jake's meticulous work was paying off, and he could see the outline of the scammer's network taking shape. It was a complex web of deception, but Jake was confident that he could untangle it. The dining table, once a place of comfort and family meals, had become a command center for their investigation. It was covered in evidence, each piece a testament to Jake's dedication and hard work. He knew that they were getting closer, and the thought of bringing the scammer to justice kept him going. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains once again, Jake felt a sense of accomplishment. He had made significant progress, but he knew that there was still work to be done. The scammer had underestimated him, and that would be their downfall. Evelyn joined him at the table, her eyes filled with gratitude and determination. They were in this together, and they would not stop until they had found the answers they were looking for. With Jake's expertise and Evelyn's unwavering resolve, they were a formidable team. The investigation was far from over, but Jake was confident that they were on the right track. The scammer's web of deceit was starting to unravel, and it was only a matter of time before they had enough evidence to take action. The journey ahead would be challenging, but Jake and Evelyn were ready to face it head-on. As the new day began, Jake and Evelyn felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were determined to uncover the truth and bring the perpetrator to justice. The road ahead would be long, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay in their path. With each passing day, they were one step closer to finding the answers they sought, and they would not rest until they had achieved their goal. Jake had been at his computer for what felt like an eternity, his eyes burning from hours of relentless searching. The digital world was vast, a tangled web of information and misinformation, but Jake was determined to find the thread that would lead him to the scammer. His desk was littered with notes, hastily scribbled usernames, and IP addresses, all pointing to dead ends. He was frustrated but not defeated. Then, buried in the depths of a particularly obscure forum, he found something that made his heart race. A user, boasting about a recent score, had posted just hours ago. The details were chillingly specific, describing how they had tricked an elderly woman into draining her entire savings. The username was Phantom Thief. Jake felt a surge of excitement and dread. This could be the break he had been looking for, but it also meant that the scammer was still active and preying on the vulnerable. He quickly took screenshots of the posts and jotted down every detail, knowing that this could be crucial evidence. The excitement was almost palpable, but he knew he had to stay focused and methodical. He began to dig deeper into Phantom Thief's online activity, tracing back through months of posts and interactions. The user was careful, never revealing too much, always staying just out of reach. But there were patterns, small inconsistencies that Jake started to piece together. It was like assembling a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing, but he was relentless. Every clue, no matter how small, brought him one step closer. The hours ticked by, the night outside growing darker and quieter. Jake could hear the distant hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, but he was lost in his own world. His mind was racing, his fingers flying over the keyboard. He pulled up maps, cross-referenced data, and slowly, the fog began to lift. He could see the outline of a person, a shadowy figure moving through the digital landscape, leaving a trail of victims behind. Finally, he stumbled upon a breakthrough. In a moment of carelessness, Phantom Thief had used the same username on a different platform, one less secure and more personal. It was a goldmine. Jake found photos, friends lists, even a few candid posts that revealed bits of the scammer's real life. He felt a rush of triumph. This was the lead he needed. With renewed energy, Jake compiled all the information and started to build a profile. He could see the scammer's arrogance, their need for validation, their utter lack of remorse. It made his blood boil, but it also sharpened his resolve. He knew that to catch Phantom Thief, he would have to think like them, anticipate their next move. He reached out to Evelyn, his partner in this investigation, sharing the new information and discussing their next steps. They decided to set a trap, creating a fake profile that would attract Phantom Thief's attention. It was risky, but they needed to draw the scammer out into the open. The plan was intricate and required precision. They crafted a digital persona, complete with a believable backstory and online presence. It had to be perfect, convincing enough to lure Phantom Thief in, but not so obvious as to raise suspicion. They spent hours fine-tuning every detail, knowing that their success depended on it. Days passed, each one filled with anticipation and anxiety. They watched and waited, monitoring their fake profile for any sign of interest. It was a nerve-wracking process, but Jake and Evelyn were patient. They knew that Phantom Thief couldn't resist a tempting target. Finally, their patience paid off. A message appeared, casual and friendly, but with the unmistakable undertone of a predator. Phantom Thief had taken the bait. Jake felt a thrill of victory, but kept his cool. The game was far from over. They had to play this out carefully, drawing the scammer in deeper without revealing their hand. They engaged in a careful dance of communication, responding to Phantom Thief's messages with just the right mix of naivety and interest. It was a delicate balance, but Jake and Evelyn were skilled at this game. Slowly, they reeled the scammer in, gathering more evidence with each interaction. As they got closer, the danger increased. Phantom Thief was clever and unpredictable, and any mistake could tip them off. Jake and Evelyn worked tirelessly, double-checking every move, every word. They were so close now, they could almost taste victory. Jake felt a wave of relief and satisfaction. The journey had been long and arduous, but they had done it. They had caught the Phantom Thief. As he looked at the collected evidence, the faces of the victims, he knew it had all been worth it. They had made a difference. The investigation was far from over, but Jake was confident that they were on the right track. The scammer's web of deceit was starting to unravel, and it was only a matter of time before they had enough evidence to take action. The journey ahead would be challenging, but Jake and Evelyn were ready to face it head-on. Jake had spent countless hours hunched over his laptop, eyes darting across multiple screens filled with lines of code and digital trails. His fingers danced over the keyboard with a rhythm that only seasoned hackers could master. The hunt for Phantom Thief had become more than a mission. It was a personal vendetta. Each keystroke brought him closer to the elusive scammer who had wreaked havoc on so many lives, including Evelyn's. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. While sifting through encrypted data logs, Jake noticed a peculiar pattern. Phantom Thief had been meticulous in covering their tracks, but everyone made mistakes. A misconfigured VPN server had leaked an IP address, a tiny breadcrumb in the vast digital landscape. Jake's heart raced as he triangulated the coordinates, his excitement mounting with each second. The location was a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, unremarkable and easily overlooked. Yet, it held the key to unmasking the elusive criminal. Jake meticulously gathered all the digital evidence, compiling a dossier that was both comprehensive and damning. Screenshots of transactions, chat logs, and server traces were all neatly organized. He knew that presenting this to the authorities required a level of precision and clarity that left no room for doubt. The weight of responsibility pressed upon him, but he was resolute. This was the moment they had been working towards. The journey to the police station felt surreal. The city bustled with its usual rhythm, indifferent to the clandestine battle that had been waging in the shadows. Jake's mind raced with possibilities and scenarios, each one a fragment of the larger puzzle. As he approached the precinct, a sense of determination washed over him. This was it, the culmination of their efforts. Inside, the atmosphere was a blend of organized chaos and methodical order. Officers moved with purpose, and the hum of activity was constant. Jake presented his findings to the officer on duty, his voice steady but filled with urgency. The officer's eyes widened as he flipped through the dossier, recognizing the gravity of the situation. Without hesitation, he summoned his superior, a seasoned detective with a keen eye for detail. The detective scrutinized the evidence, his expression a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Jake could see the wheels turning in his mind, weighing the validity of the information against the protocols of law enforcement. After what felt like an eternity, the detective nodded, acknowledging the thoroughness of Jake's work. He assured Jake that a team would be dispatched immediately to the identified location. As the police mobilized, Jake felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The raid on the apartment would either be the climax of their efforts or a disheartening setback. He relayed the developments to Evelyn, who had been anxiously waiting for news. Her relief was palpable, yet tempered by the same cautious optimism that Jake felt. The evening air was cool as the police convoy made its way through the city. The outskirts were a stark contrast to the bustling metropolis, quiet and almost eerie. The apartment complex loomed ahead, a nondescript building that betrayed no hint of the secrets it harbored. Officers moved with practiced efficiency, surrounding the perimeter and preparing for entry. Jake watched from a distance, his heart pounding. The minutes stretched into an agonizing wait, each second amplifying his tension. Finally, the signal was given, and the officers breached the apartment. The ensuing moments were a blur of movement and shouted commands. Jake held his breath, straining to catch any sign of the outcome. When the all-clear was given, the detective emerged from the building, a triumphant look on his face. They had found the equipment, the digital fingerprints, and most importantly, the person behind Phantom Thief. The scammer was taken into custody, a figure who seemed unremarkable in person but had orchestrated a web of deception that had ensnared so many. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. The long hours, the sleepless nights, and the relentless pursuit had finally borne fruit. Yet, he knew this was only the beginning. The legal process would follow, and justice would be served. But for now, there was a sense of closure, a validation of their efforts. Back at the precinct, the detective debriefed Jake, commending his tenacity and skill. The evidence was solid, and the case against Phantom Thief was strong. Jake and Evelyn had not only uncovered the truth, but had also ensured that the perpetrator would face the consequences of their actions. Jake and Evelyn were back at the police station, where the plan for the sting operation was being meticulously laid out. The air inside the precinct buzzed with a mixture of urgency and anticipation. Officers moved swiftly, preparing the equipment and finalizing their roles. Jake could feel the gravity of the moment. This was their chance to catch Phantom Thief and put an end to his schemes. Under the dim fluorescent lights, Evelyn was the picture of calm determination. Her graceful composure masked the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She was the linchpin of the operation, the bait that would lure Phantom Thief into the trap. Evelyn had contacted him again, her voice steady as she pretended to have stumbled upon more valuable information. The anticipation of the upcoming encounter hung heavily in the air. Meanwhile, Jake was coordinating with the detectives, ensuring that every detail was accounted for. The plan was to have Evelyn meet Phantom Thief in a public location, where undercover officers would be strategically positioned to apprehend him. Jake reviewed the evidence once more, making sure that everything was in place to secure a conviction. He knew that any slip-up could allow Phantom Thief to escape and continue his deceitful ways. As the time for the operation approached, the tension in the room was palpable. Jake and Evelyn exchanged a brief, reassuring glance. Despite the risks, they both knew that this was the culmination of their hard work and dedication. They had come too far to let fear undermine their resolve. Evelyn made her way to the rendezvous point, a bustling cafe in the heart of the city. The place was chosen for its high foot traffic, which would make it easier for the undercover officers to blend in. She took a seat at a corner table, her eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of Phantom Thief. The minutes seemed to stretch into hours as she waited, her heart pounding in her chest. Jake, watching from a surveillance van parked nearby, felt a mix of anxiety and determination. He had faith in Evelyn's ability to keep her composure, but the unpredictable nature of Phantom Thief made him uneasy. The team of officers was ready, their eyes trained on Evelyn and the surrounding area. Every moment seemed to hang in a delicate balance. Finally, Phantom Thief appeared. He was dressed inconspicuously, blending in with the crowd as he approached Evelyn's table. She greeted him with a smile, masking her nerves with practiced ease. They exchanged pleasantries, the conversation flowing smoothly as Evelyn subtly guided it towards the fabricated information she had promised. Phantom Thief listened intently, his eyes betraying a hint of greed as Evelyn detailed the supposed new lead. He leaned in closer, oblivious to the watchful eyes of the undercover officers. Jake held his breath, knowing that the window for action was closing. The signal came. Evelyn subtly touched her earring, the prearranged cue that Phantom Thief had taken the bait. Little did he know, the net was already closing in around him. Undercover officers, strategically positioned throughout the cafe, were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They blended seamlessly into the background, their appearances and behaviors meticulously crafted to avoid raising suspicion. Jake and Evelyn, the couple whose resilience had brought them to this pivotal moment, watched from a discreet vantage point outside. The events of the past weeks had taken their toll, but determination burned in their eyes. They had been pushed to their limits, but they had emerged stronger, united by a common goal, justice. As they stood there, the weight of anxiety was palpable, yet it was tempered by a steely resolve. Inside the cafe, Phantom Thief pulled out his phone, his fingers dancing over the screen as he initiated the final steps of his latest scheme. He was so absorbed in his actions that he failed to notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere. The officers, sensing the moment had arrived, exchanged almost imperceptible nods. The tension in the room, unnoticed by most, was electric. Suddenly, in a coordinated move that spoke of meticulous planning, the officers converged on Phantom Thief. The young man's head snapped up, confusion flashing across his face as he registered the figures closing in on him. Panic set in, his mind racing for an escape route, but it was too late. Firm hands gripped his arms, and he was yanked to his feet, the clink of handcuffs a harsh punctuation to his fall from grace. Outside, Jake and Evelyn held their breath as they watched the scene unfold. Relief, sweet and overwhelming, washed over them as they saw Phantom Thief being led away in handcuffs. It was over. The nightmare that had threatened to consume their lives was finally coming to an end. They exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the battle they had fought and won together. As the officers escorted Phantom Thief out of the cafe, the young man's expression was a mix of defiance and resignation. The reality of his situation was sinking in, the gravity of his actions crashing down on him. The crowd inside the cafe, initially stunned into silence, began to buzz with whispers and speculation. The normalcy of moments before had been shattered, replaced by an undercurrent of excitement and disbelief. For Jake and Evelyn, this was a moment of vindication. The journey had been arduous, fraught with danger and uncertainty, but they had persevered. They watched as Phantom Thief was placed in a police car, the doors slamming shut with a finality that echoed through the quiet street. It was a sound that signaled the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As they stood there, the enormity of what they had accomplished began to sink in. They had taken on a formidable adversary and emerged victorious. The relief was almost tangible, a weight lifted from their shoulders. Yet, even in this moment of triumph, they knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be questions to answer, loose ends to tie up, and the ever-present task of rebuilding their lives. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment to savor their victory. The future, though uncertain, seemed a little brighter. They had faced the darkness and found their way back to the light, and that was something worth celebrating. As they turned to leave, hand in hand, they carried with them the strength and resilience that had seen them through the darkest of times. The city continued its rhythm around them, oblivious to the monumental events that had just transpired. For Jake and Evelyn, this was not just an ending, but a new beginning. They had been tested and had emerged stronger, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey was far from over, but they were ready together. As they walked away from the cafe, the sound of their footsteps a steady beat against the pavement, they left behind the shadows of their past. Ahead of them lay a future untold, a canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of their resilience and hope. The arrest of Phantom Thief was a significant milestone, a testament to their unwavering determination and the power of justice. And as they moved forward, they did so with the knowledge that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, their bond unbreakable, their spirits unyielding. Back at Evelyn's house, the atmosphere was filled with an almost palpable sense of relief and triumph. Jake and Evelyn sat together in the cozy living room, the soft light from the fireplace casting a warm glow on their faces. The ordeal they had faced seemed like a distant memory now, though its effects had left an indelible mark on their lives. The stolen money had been recovered and returned to Evelyn's account, a tangible symbol of their victory over the shadows that had threatened to consume them. Evelyn's gratitude was beyond words, Her faith in the world, which had been shaken to its core, was now restored. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that justice had been served and that the strength of her family had prevailed. News of Jake's clever plan had spread quickly through their community. He was hailed as a hero, his resourcefulness and determination celebrated by neighbors and friends alike. It was a recognition that he accepted with humility, knowing that the true victory lay in the safety and happiness of his family. Evelyn's story became a powerful reminder to all who heard it. It underscored the importance of vigilance in the face of adversity and the unyielding strength of family bonds. Her experience served as a beacon of hope and resilience, a testament to the idea that justice could be achieved through both the law and the unwavering support of loved ones. The days that followed were marked by a renewed sense of purpose for both Jake and Evelyn. They had faced a formidable challenge and had emerged stronger, their bond fortified by the trials they had endured. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they were an unbreakable force, their spirits unyielding. As they settled back into their daily lives, the city continued its rhythm around them, oblivious to the monumental events that had just transpired. For Jake and Evelyn, this was not just an ending, but a new beginning. They had left behind the shadows of their past and were now looking ahead to a future untold, a canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of their resilience and hope. The arrest of Phantom Thief was a significant milestone, a testament to their unwavering determination and the power of justice. It was a victory that resonated deeply within their community, a story that would be told and retold as an example of courage and tenacity. As the days turned into weeks, Jake and Evelyn found themselves gradually returning to a sense of normalcy. The fear and uncertainty that had once loomed over them were replaced by a newfound sense of confidence and security. They knew that challenges would come and go, but they were ready to face them together, their bond unbreakable. The living room, once a place of tension and worry, was now filled with laughter and joy. The memories of their ordeal served as a reminder of their strength and the power of their love. They had faced the darkness and had emerged victorious, their spirits unyielding. In the end, it was not just the recovery of the stolen money that mattered, but the journey they had taken together. It was a journey that had tested their limits, pushed them to their breaking points, and ultimately brought them closer than ever before. As they sat together in the living room, the fire crackling softly in the background, they knew that they were ready for whatever lay ahead. Their story was far from over, but they were confident that they could face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they were unstoppable, their bond unbreakable, their spirits unyielding. And so, with hearts full of hope and minds ready for the future, Jake and Evelyn looked ahead to the next chapter of their lives. It was a chapter that would be written with the strength of their love, the resilience of their spirits, and the unwavering bond that had carried them through the darkest of times. The journey was far from over, but they were ready together.